Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussions, news, and interviews, presenting The Film Scene with Illeana Douglas. Illeana is an actress, writer, author, and film historian with a need to discuss movies that borders on obsession. You'll learn the history of movies one great story at a time. The Film Scene is the deep cuts of movie podcasts, featuring movies we love by the people who made them. And now, Illeana Douglas.
Hello, everyone. It's Illeana Douglas. Welcome to the Film Scene. Okay, fasten your seatbelts, everyone. We have in our studio, we're devoting our entire time to speak to Ruta Lee, who was born in Quebec to Lithuanian parents. She moved to California. She worked as a cashier and usherette, just like Carol Burnett, and a candy girl at Grauman's Theater. Starred in her first show, George Burns and the Gracie Allen Show, and from there was in so many movies, including the Academy Award-nominated musical Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, billed as, which we're going to get to, Ruta Kilmonis, and other films include Anything Goes, Funny Face, Witness for the Prosecution, and Marjorie Morning. I can't speak.
Morning Star.
The Bite is, and over 112 television shows, musical theater. She's going to be an author. You're in the middle of writing that book. Let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, Ruta Lee.
Wow, what an opening. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you.
You're the best. The first question I have to ask you now, Ruta and I have worked together before. We were on the TCM cruise. You have the most amazing amount of energy, and you're so upbeat about show business, and that's the same. I just love it. I mean, how do you maintain just that love of, the grease paint?
I guess because I've never experienced anything that resembles the sleazy side of it.
Uh-huh.
And there's a sleazy side to everything.
Yes.
But I think, like you, I have a love for the industry. Mm-hmm. And the industry seems to love back, which is awfully nice when that happens. And when you have an audience the way you do, that kind of hangs in there with you and supports you and turns the dial to you or turns the knob or pays the ticket to see you, what a blessing that is. That's the dear Lord sending down his imprimatur on keep doing what you're doing, kid. You're doing something right. And I think that part of that, though, and I think you recognize this as well as I, is that somewhere down the line of a career, of a life, never mind a career, if it's going at all well for you, you got to pay some of it back. Mm-hmm. Or, if you're smart, you'll pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And not wait for God to tap you on the shoulder and say,
yes,
get your ass in there. We have to do something.
So I want to go back to your first official job, which you were fired from, being an usher. You were an usher at the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater.
I was.
Now the TLC Theater.
I was going to Hollywood High, right around the corner. Mm-hmm. And during the summer, I got a job. I needed to make some extra money so that I could buy padded bras or whatever one wanted in those days. Mm-hmm. And I got a job as an usherette. And I was in my glory, Illeana, standing at the top of the aisle with a flashlight. I mean, most of our audience is too frigging young to know what an usherette even was,
right,
or an usher. But we literally saw people to their seats. Uh-huh. And I could stand at the top of the aisle and watch the movie queens, Betty Grable, June Haver, Mitzi Gaynor, Ethel Merman, doing their numbers on that screen, and I'd stand there and say, oh, please, God, please, let me do this. Let me do this someday. Well, I was very happy there, but then the candy girl got sick, so I got moved up and probably got $2 more a week to be the candy girl. Now, I have to tell you, Illeana, math has never been my long suit. Uh-huh. I mean, I am terrible in math. But I could deal with that because everything was 10 cents, 15 cents, 25 cents, 50 cents. could deal with that. I did very well. And plus, when I wasn't selling popcorn, I could go over and hold the door open and watch the movies, right?
Right.
Well, one night, the cashier in the box office got sick. And I got promoted to cashier. And I said, but I can't. And they said, look, it's very easy. Somebody gives you a $5 bill. You punch in $1.98 twice, and then $5, and it'll give you the right change. Mm-hmm. Well, long story short, we were $40 short that night.
Uh-oh.
And I got fired.
Oh, no.
And I said to the general manager, I didn't steal the money. I told you I wasn't good in math. And you're going to be sorry because one of these days my hand and footprints are going to be here, and I'll show you. Well, talk about God working in mysterious ways. My star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is directly in front of the box office of Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Wow.
Ta-da!
That is amazing. That's my fantasy. I want to get, I think I'd rather get a star on Hollywood Boulevard than an Oscar.
Really?
That's my favorite. I always say it's my favorite old-time show busy.
You know, that's an interesting thought.
It's permanent. People forget you win an Oscar.
They sure do.
But
how quickly they
tourists
forget. Walk over and so on and so forth.
I always get a thrill every time when I walk by and I see the certain names. It makes you think of the person.
Hey, podcast listeners and viewers, if you go to my star, take a little polish cloth with you and clean it up, all right? Get some of the gum off. Damn, that makes me so angry that we Americans are such slobs and spit gum out all over the street everywhere.
Yes, clean Ruta's star, for goodness sakes. So then after you were fired, you were so young when you got your first job.
Probably 15,
like 15.
Then, yeah, 14, 15.
And so your first job was working for Burns and Allen
the
television
first job
show.
I got
Literally
paid
first
for.
Job. Okay.
You know, it's what got me my SAG card, Screen Actors Guild card.
Wow.
And to have been appreciated and respected by George Burns and Gracie Allen. Woo! It still sends kind of a chill down my spine, you know. And he became kind of a fan that kept following me. And then when I became a big muckamuck with the Thalians, you know, and was doing stuff, he would come and sit at my table. You know, he'd come as my guest. He'd pay, but he'd come to sit at my table. And I thought, I'm blessed, you know, to have that.
Did you feel, because we were talking about this before the show, I spent my night watching, Jerry Lewis and Sophie Tucker, who it was a famous vaudevillian, and George Burns and Allen, again, literally one step away from vaudeville.
Precisely.
And
out of vaudeville, they did some early movies.
Yes.
And, of course, other theater engagements, you know, the way big theaters used to have stars come in between movies, which was kind of amazing. Well, Frank Sinatra did that.
Yes. But I feel like it was such a part of their dynasty to, have respect for other acts. And when you said taking care of you and looking after you, and I love that idea. I don't know if we still have that, but
I don't know that we do either. And I also respected very much, and I think it came from the early days of any kind of theater when it was Gaslights and then vaudeville, that there was this need to do for people in our industry who maybe aren't doing quite as well as we are, maybe are really eating at Horn and Hardut and making soup out of ketchup and hot water. Horn and Hardut, boy, there's a name you won't
know. We're
going
to need footnotes
for all of you. It was a place in New York that I wish still existed, where there were little glass doors, and behind it was a sandwich, a piece of pie, a strudel, whatever, and you put the coins in and got the thing out. But there was always ketchup on the table, and there was always hot water for tea. And all actors used to go in and eat the free saltines and make tomato soup out of ketchup and hot water. That sustained a lot of poor Broadway actors who didn't have a pot to pee in,
I bet they did. Now, another show that you did around this time I thought was fascinating. I mean, we're going to get to, you did hundreds of television shows, but
over 2,500 shows.
I know, and these were again in the days. We shoot 8 episodes,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah.
they did 39
Yes.
episodes. But you worked. I was surprised to learn you worked on The Adventures of Superman.
Yes, it was one of the early shows that I did. Some people think it was my first, but I don't think so, because it was Burns and Allen that got me my union card. And I almost got fired on that Superman episode because I was supposed to do the jitterbug or something with a dance partner, and I said, why don't we rehearse this while nobody is here? They've gone to lunch.
Yes.
And I looked for the gramophone,
Yeah.
the record player, and it wasn't plugged in, so I reached down and plugged it in. Well, one of the union electricians said, little girl, you don't do that. You're going to get fired if you do that.
Wow.
I didn't know about that.
Don't touch. And so you worked with George Reeves. Were you shocked when he was found? I mean, that's such a mysterious,
that was quite
still a
bit
mystery
later
to this day.
than after the time I worked with him. But he lived, if I'm not mistaken, up in Laurel Canyon, where
Yes.
I live. And so that's why I was aware of that. But did they ever find who did it?
No, they've never. It's a mystery.
Oh, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. We'll go do detective work.
Yeah. Well, I'm always fascinated
I am
by
too.
Hollywood, mysteries.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Remember the famous Thelma Todd?
Yes.
Whatever. There's quite a few. Thelma Todd again in our series of.
And they never found that
naming.
person either,
She was
did they?
work with the Marx Brothers, and she had a nightclub out by the beach.
Yes.
That's another thing. Were you part of I'm always fascinated about the beginnings of Malibu and Malibu society and people going out there and having
Well, I
little
just
bungalows and
remember
things.
that when I was a kid, somebody that was working in a little theater, there was the gallery stage where I was working when I got the job with Burns and Allen. I was in high school at the time, and there was the Players Ring, which was a rather successful small Hollywood theater, and a lot of very successful people either started there or worked there or did something there. And where was I going with this? I had something so important to tell you.
Oh, we were talking about
Malibu.
Malibu.
Yeah.
One of the kids that worked in the theater with me bought a house, a little frame house on stilts kind of, on the beach in Malibu for $35,000. You couldn't buy a brick for $35,000 anymore in Malibu.
That is amazing.
And I stop and think about the idiocy. Well, of course, the house that I now own and live in was originally purchased by my parents. And they bought this property, 6 acres, in the middle of Laurel Canyon. Of course, those 6 acres go uphill,
Right.
But nevertheless, bridle paths, a stable, all kinds of stuff on it, for $65,000, which was more money than they ever dreamed of having. Wow. So everything that they sold in Montreal to come here, they put into that house and then made it work all through the years. It was later, or it was at one point, lived in by Rita Hayworth and Orson Welles.
Wow.
And so I keep rubbing my ass on the walls, assuming the glamour will come off onto me.
Or some ghosts.
Yes, but I wouldn't dream of selling that house now for under $15 million.
Wow.
Now that goes to show you what real estate does.
Yes.
So if you're not in show business or you're not successful in show business, take every penny you've got and put it into real estate.
Yep. Like Bob Hope. That's what what he did. Okay, I want to get to so many of these great movies. We've got to get to Seven Brides, which,
what an experience.
Which I heard you say which I totally agree with, was one of the few times you actually auditioned for something and got the part. Because normally, as we know, you could have 1,000 auditions, but usually the way you get the part is just being in the right place
at the right time.
At the right time,
of course.
But you auditioned for that, and
I did, and I don't know whether it was my audition that was good or whether it was my mother on her knees in the church across the street praying for me to get it. Maybe it was a combination of both. God took pity and made me do something right. And of course, what I did that was right when I was asked by Michael Kidd to do a little something, I did my balletic stuff, because that's what I had been doing. And he said, okay, that's fine and good. Could you do a little sort of jazz thing? And I tried a little jazz stuff. And Stanley Donen, of course, was there. He was the director. And then he said, can you do something folksy? Well, hell, can I do something folksy? I'm Lithuanian. If there's one thing I can do, it's a damn good polka, So I polka'd up a storm, and son of a gun, there I was, teamed with Matt Maddox, who was only one of the most brilliant dancers.
Yes.
And I had just seen him in a show downtown, and I thought he was the sexiest thing I'd ever seen on the stage. And the fact that these fabulous dancers, they were the best dancers in America that were in that show.
Yeah.
I can't say that Jeff Richards was a great dancer, but he was good looking, so they made it work. But really good dancers, and I found myself at the bar every morning. When I say bar, I mean B-A-R-R-E, the French ballet bar, taking the class, a warm-up class every day that our choreographer would do. I'd say, what am I doing here? I mean, I'm a little kid. I'm 16 or 17 years old. These are real professionals. What the hell am I doing here? How did I get this? And I learned something during that show, and that is that you don't have to be all that perfect technically. You just have to sell it like you are.
Right.
Your face and your arms and your body language, forget the perfect little steps that don't show under the damn skirt anyway.
Right. Just look like you're having
a good time.
A great time. And you said something else interesting. While you were filming, they were filming Brigadoon, and the studio's expectations were that Brigadoon was going to be the big hit.
Oh, all the money went into Brigadoon. Seven Brides was a little also in the running, a cute little film that we got. And I think eventually they woke up to the fact that they had something very special.
Yes.
To have this kind of butch, fabulous approach for the men in dancing. Ballet dancers were doing this fabulous stuff.
Right.
Not Nancy
acrobatic
stuff, Oh, and so good, so macho.
Right.
And they woke up to the fact that America was really going to like this. And Illeana, I don't know if I ever shared this with you. They came to all of us after the shooting and said, we're going to put a little money into putting everybody out on a big PR campaign. So we're taking all the brides and breaking up the country and sending you to different parts of the country. So I got from the Great Divide West. And the people in the PR department came to me and said, Ruta, you are never going to be a movie star with a name like Ruta Kilmonis.
They may have a point.
Oh, okay. So we kick around a lot of names. Everybody threw something in the hat and hopper, and I'm waiting, and somebody said Ruta Lee. And I insisted on keeping the Ruta, which was unheard of because it's a national symbol of Lithuania, the Ruta plant. And I said, Ruta Lee. Well, the diminutive in Russian, in Lithuanian, in Polish, in Yiddish, and in anything is Rutele. Rutele or Rutale. So I said, Ruta Lee, Rutale. That sounds good to me. That's fine. So I became Ruta Lee. And I did everything that you do, as you well know, when you have to go out and PR a picture. You are milking a cow in a country thing. You're chewing tobacco with the baseball players. You're standing on a street in San Diego in a rainstorm in a bathing suit. Why? Because it'll make pages, make space. And then they gave me all of Canada to do. Because why? Because I came from Canada originally. And so I got all of Canada, and everything is Ruta Lee doing this, Ruta Lee doing that, Ruta Lee doing that. Somebody forgot to mention it to the person that did the credits on the film.
Oh.
And it came out Ruta Kilmonis. So all those people in Saskatchewan are saying, who was that girl that said she was in the movie?
Where's Ruta Kilmonis?
Isn't that something? But boy, did that ever stand me in good stead. Again, God and serendipity working together.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the Soviet Union, big long story about my grandmother. We'll go into that later. Everybody in Lithuania was so thrilled that Seven Brides, which they ran every 15 minutes, had Ruta Kilmonis, a good Lithuanian girl.
Ah,
isn't that interesting?
Yes, that's wonderful.
I was just going to ask, I would guess that your parents, who are, of course, Lithuanian immigrants, were they excited and supportive about the idea of you pursuing an industry that's not a traditional sort of, blue-collar American bootstraps type of career?
Very interesting in that my mother and father were very, very poor peasant stock in Lithuania. And why their families got deported to Siberia, somebody is going to have to explain to me someday. But, I mean, they were poor. She carried her shoes to church on Sunday because they had to be passed down to the next girl. And they sort of said, my mother was very smart. She never went past the 3rd grade, but she had real street smarts and country smarts. And she thought, let's get out of Lithuania, let's go to America, where we know the streets are paved with gold. They tried to get into the United States, but the quotas were already closed. This was like 28, 29. So my father could get into Canada by signing up to work for a year in the wheat fields in Saskatchewan.
Wow.
Which he did, and he saved his money, and he then brought my mother over, where I was born. My mother heard from the woman that ran the kindergarten, Mrs. Jackson, to whom I will be grateful till the day I die, because she's the one that said to my mother, your child is very different from the rest of the children that I have in all my classes. She's out there and she's doing and whatever. Give her lessons. Give her music lessons, give her singing lessons, give her dancing lessons, whatever. My mother did. My father used to say, God damn it, why you wasting money? She's lazy, she don't work, she don't like. And he was right. I don't like the work, but I love performing.
Right.
That kind of thing. I'm sure you're somewhat the same.
So, totally. Who wants to rehearse?
Aren't we all, right?
So she gave me the lessons, and my mom knew nothing about show business when it came to theater.
Right.
In New York, not that far away from Montreal, but I was in church plays and sang in the choir and did that sort of stuff. But she knew movies, and she thought that I was Lithuania's answer to Shirley Temple. And so
I like that on the
she made sure that when we could, we moved to a warm climate, and the warm climate was not Florida. It was California, because that's where the movies were made.
Right.
So I'm very grateful to Mrs. Jackson. I'm very grateful to my mom. And I'm grateful for my dad, too, because he paid for a hell of a lot of it.
Yeah.
For giving me the lessons to do whatever I had to learn.
Well, luckily you made it big. I'm curious, again, when you were on these, because, that's my fantasy. In the early 90s, I got a little taste of being in a movie, and they would send you to Europe for a promotion, or Spain, or that's all gone. it's all gone. But I had a little bit of it, and I just was wondering again. Now, you're traveling by train? Train, bus,
plane.
They are flying.
Plane.
And so what's that experience
well,
like?
It wasn't Pony Express time, dear.
It's, it's the MGM. And is it like we imagine, where they're, planting stories of romances and,
some of that existed.
All of that glamour?
I really didn't date actors. I don't know why. I went out a couple of times with actors, but mostly it was set up so that there would be a photo play, which was a great Hollywood publicity magazine. It was about the movies. And so I did date a couple of times, but nothing, there was never any romance, even though it was built to be an up-and-coming romance. But that was all just to make space. I always liked businessmen better.
Mm-hmm. You were smart.
I think I was. And because I always said I want one marriage, 10 Oscars. Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't got an Oscar, but I do have one marriage, and boy, it's been a long one. And I'm going to share something with you now. I'm going through kind of a really tough siege in my life for me, because I don't know what illnesses are, and I don't put up with them very much. It's always get up and do it,
Mm-hmm.
Take an aspirin and go do it. And my husband, whom you met, and gorgeous guy, tall,
lovely.
lean, he's like a cross between Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin. He's somewhere in there, And he had a stroke a couple of years ago, which left him fine physically, but out to lunch mentally.
Oh, I see.
And it's a very difficult thing I'm going through, and I'm going to have to put something in the book, which I'm completing now.
Mm-hmm.
I have to rewrite certain things, like about Debbie, because now my best friend is gone.
Right.
And I want to put something in about living with dementia and Alzheimer's
Mm-hmm.
in your life, because I think that people who will buy my book or buy anybody's book appreciate the celebrity that they have learned to either like or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
sharing some of the pain as well as the joy.
Right.
And saying, gee, we have something in common, and what do you know that I don't know, etc. So I sort of feel like it might be of a little bit of benefit to put down that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through a lot and learning a lot. Boy, am I learning about the one virtue God did not give me a lot of, patience.
Well, again, you come from an era where people like Frank Sinatra were living their lives pretty publicly. I mean, every little thing they did was photographed or written about. It must have been very challenging.
Well, I suppose it's still going on today, too, isn't it?
I think so, but I think that, again, the expectation was there for the movie star really to share family photos, and you had to let in. I know my grandfather talks about when you were at MGM, especially.
Yes,
you had to go be out and go to various nightclubs,
of course, and be seen and all of that. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm sort of thinking that the whole new generation of, in quotes, stars are not, people might be wild about them, but they are not beloved the way the stars were of the former generation. And why is that? Because there were not 6,000 channels of entertainment on television.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up with somebody in your life,
right,
and in your ken when it came to certain kinds of entertainment, and you knew about those people, and they were nurtured and raised by the studios to be icons,
right.
And we don't have that anymore.
No, also the idea, as you were talking, it reminded me of my mom, who grew up in Queens, and when we were talking about publicity tours, and the idea that she could see Ginger Rogers up so close and say she had peach fuzz on her face, and she remembered it for the rest of her life, or Danny Kaye or some of these people. So that's what I think you mean. They have this personal relationship with the star. And they were dressed to the nines.
They were dressed to the nines.
My mom talks about to this day the way Danny Kaye, every time she talks about Danny Kaye, with the little silk,
cravat.
Yes, and how stylish all the movie stars were,
Well,
which
also,
you are.
But remember that we lived with them for years.
Yeah.
And now you have big stars for, 3 years, 4 years on television, and 2 years later, if they're not on the tube, you don't know who they are.
Yes, that's true. That's true. All right, so after you did the Seven Brides, were you ever signed at a studio, or did you work freelance? How did that work?
I was signed at a studio for about 20 minutes when I was all of maybe 12 or 13 years old. I took my drama lessons from an old retired actress, a character actress named Laura Casely Brooks. And she had like maybe 5 or 6 students. All of them were adults. I was the only child that she had. And Laura Casely Brooks would put together an evening at like the Hollywood Studio Club or something, or a hotel room that she would take. And she would prepare her students to do a couple of scenes, you know, something light and comedic and something dramatic, blah, blah, blah. And then she would do little readings, shows. And she would ask different agents, different talent scouts, different producers, directors, anybody she could wrangle to come in and see these students. Ivan Kahn was the head of talent at 20th Century Fox at that point. And he didn't come, but he sent his secretary. And she saw me do a scene, and I was one of those kids like Natalie Wood or Margaret O'Brien that could pull up tears at the drop of a hat, you know, and play a very dramatic scene, which was unusual for a young girl, you know, 12, 13 years old at the time, just on the verge of becoming a girl. And she was very impressed, and she went back to Ivan Kahn, who had me come in. And on her advice, they signed me, and for a screen test. I got assigned to a woman that if I ever run into her in hell or anywhere, I will make her stay longer, because her name was Helena Sorel, and it's not good to speak ill of the dead, but of this bitch I will.
There you go.
And why? Because she took a stupid little girl that didn't know poop from shinola and said, learn this scene. And it would be something from 17 or whatever, very light, frothy stuff. And obviously, if you're going to be impressed with me, you're going to be impressed with what Ivan Kahn saw in me when he looked at me and heard about me, was that I might be the young Anne Baxter.
Right.
That kind of dramatic pizzazz, you know. So I'd learn it and by heart, and I'd come back and, no, I don't really like that one. Let's do another one. She'd do something else. Finally, after about 3 months of this, she said, I'll write something for you. And she wrote me a piece of fluff. Well, of course, my folks didn't know any better. Laura Casely Brooks probably should have known better, but she wasn't invited into all this melange. And so we did this piece of fluff. I must say it was the first time that I had been in makeup and had eyelashes on. Well, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven when I saw how pretty I looked in spite of the crooked tooth, you know. And clearly I did not get signed because it was a piece of crap that I did. And who do I have to thank for that but Helena Sorel?
Helena.
Yeah. The other one that was there was Marilyn Monroe's coach, Natasha Lytess. I wish I'd gotten Lytess.
Yeah,
because I have a feeling that she Natasha, good Russian, she understands.
Yes. But Marilyn bounced around quite a bit too until she found Fox was her. Wasn't that her more permanent? Place. So how long after that was that? Was it before then you got into? You met Frank Sinatra. Then is this post?
Frank came a lot later.
For Witness.
That's a whole fabulous story, because I don't know if I ever said this, but your audience will probably love hearing it. Frank Sinatra was going to help out, I can't think of her name right now, but she was the owner of the Mocambo, which was one of the big 3 nightclubs anywhere in the world, I think. Ciro's Mocambo and the Trocadero on Sunset Strip. And television, this was the early 50s, and television had taken over, or not the early 50s, the mid 50s going into the late 50s. Television was really taking over, and nightclub business was going down the toilet because, you had all this entertainment, all these channels and the 3 majors, with great entertainment. Who was going to go to nightclubs and spend that kind of money anymore? So Frank said to the owner, Mary Morrison, that was her name, I'll come in and play for a week. Sammy will come in, Vic Damone will come in, Dean will come in, we'll get everybody in to play a week and see if we can't get the ball rolling and get some traction here. I was invited by a lovely man who was like America's host, Scotty Rubin from Chicago, a very big lawyer that loved pretty people around him and entertained beautifully, and he invited me along with a lot of other people to come to the opening of Frank Sinatra. Well, I was enchanted because I had never seen Frank Sinatra live, but this was when he was doing all the beautiful unrequited love songs, Be Still My Heart, and the great Swing Along With Me, and the great albums. So I said, yes, I'd happily go. And Frank was working on a dais right out in front. On the stage was filled with orchestra. And nightclub stages are very small to start with, so it was filled with Frank's orchestra. And he was working on a little tiny hat box practically in front of the stage, which meant that some of the audience was behind him. And if I'm here, that some are back there. I, of course, am so enthralled with him because nobody was or ever will be like Frank Sinatra. I mean, he's just plain mesmerizing. And I sat there with my mouth hanging open watching him, my heart beating away to all of his music. And a note came to the table by one of the waiters who asked our host to bring me over to meet him. So I went over, and my host said, "This is Miss Lee." He said, "Miss Lee, my name is, my God, I forgot the producer's name. I'll tell you in a minute."
Koch?
No.
Hornblow?
Arthur Hornblow Jr.
Yes, sir. Hornblow.
Thank you. Arthur Hornblow Jr. And I am producing a film called Witness for the Prosecution. And I have just given you the most unique screen test I've ever done. I watched you watch Frank Sinatra, and I think you would be a very good love interest for Tyrone Power in my film. Will you come in and meet Billy Wilder in the morning? Well, Billy Wilder was God. And I said, is tomorrow too soon? And so I went in to meet Billy Wilder, and they put me on camera. Marlene Dietrich took one look at my blonde head and said, "Nick, nine, forget it." I became a brunette overnight, and that's how I got to be the ingenue, the soubrette, in Witness for the Prosecution. Okay, fade out, fade in. It's, 3-4 years later. We all know that Frank loved nothing more than staying home for a big Italian dinner and screening a new movie. And Howard Koch was his partner then,
right,
in the film setup that they had. And what do they screen that night but Witness for the Prosecution? And Frank said to Howie Koch, whom I loved, I've been watching this little Ruta Lee chick on television a lot. What do you think we put her in one of our upcoming films? Howie said, "You couldn't have picked a better choice." That's how I became the leading lady to Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, Peter Lawford, the Crosby Boys.
Yes.
In Sergeants 3.
Perfect.
Now,
Wow.
You want to talk about gorgeous serendipity?
Right place at the right time.
Isn't that something?
So, Witness for Prosecution, did they shoot here or in London?
They rebuilt Old Bailey to scale.
Okay.
Not to scale, to 3/4 scale.
Right.
On 2 sound stages at Goldwyn Studios.
And where was Goldwyn Studios, just so we know?
On Formosa. You know where the Formosa
Yes.
Cafe is?
Okay.
Across the street.
I believe it's now called The Lot. We always, my show is
Yes.
such deep cuts. I love to visit these places. So that is the former Goldwyn Studios.
But I have something very funny that I think you and your audience will love. When I came into the picture, it was about maybe 4 weeks after they had already started filming, before I was needed. And Grady Hunt, who did all of my costumes from then on, had made this wonderful little tight gray dress, with fanny and everything out perky, and a perky little hat and a fur wrap and the whole thing. And in makeup, the guys, who were very protective, I just love our makeup people, said, listen, Ruta, Charles Laughton is very important in this film, but he's a nasty old faggot. He doesn't like young girls. Okay. He's going to give you a bad time, so you just do your work and don't worry. So I went in with a little bit of fear and trepidation, and everybody's sitting about in a British tea circle, and no one's paying attention to me. For the first time in my life, I wish the floor would open up and swallow me. All of a sudden, someone comes along and hits me on the rear end, and I go flying across the room, and I turn around, and it's Charles Laughton. He says, that's the best damned ass I've seen in a long time.
Oh, wow.
And he became my best friend. And he'd pout if I didn't come in to the studio and say hello to him before anybody else. Mm-hmm. And he taught me perquacky and all kinds of games. And he and his darling wife, Elsa Lanchester, are the ones that sort of helped me keep that Middle English accent. Mm-hmm. Because very high tone English is quite easy to do. Limey is a little more easy to do. But that Middle English is something else. And they were very, very helpful with it, which I appreciate to this day.
Well, it's such a wonderful film. And it was based on... Had you seen the play? It was extremely successful.
I had not. I know it was a very successful play. I had worked with the leading lady, whose name I'll call you at 2 a.m. and tell you. Okay. I had worked with her on, I don't know, some television show or other, on Perry Mason, I think. Mm-hmm. And I know that she was a brilliant... Marion Seldes.
Oh, yes.
Marion Seldes.
Yeah.
Long dark hair like yours.
I remember her.
Big eyes like yours.
Yes, she was a friend of my grandfather's.
Ah, I don't doubt it, because she's a wonderful actress. But I had not seen the play, but they made us all do a publicity thing of where we signed a non-disclosure of the ending.
Right.
So because... And they wouldn't seat people at the movie until the movie was over, because they didn't want the ending to be
so
shown.
Working with the great Billy Wilder, I mean, that must have been quite a thrill.
I think that Billy Wilder was and remains in my mind the funniest man I've ever known in my life. Mm-hmm. He should have been a stand-up comic. He saw everything through laugh-filled eyes. And, I mean, he was doing a very serious play here.
Right.
But he found humor where he could that was so lovely, for Charles and for Elsa.
The little bit with the monocle.
Wasn't that something? And I just loved him. But he was so good. He would say to Marlene Dietrich, he literally read the line to her. He wouldn't read it to her, the words, but he would say, Marlene, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. Da 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 da. Come on. Da 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 da. And she would, I guess he wanted to change her
the
delivery
emphasis, right,
a little bit, and she would get very kind of quiet and monotone. And if she didn't do it right, he'd say to her, Marlena, watch out, I'm going to make a lampshade out of you. Oh, God. So you see, he had this wild sense of humor.
Yes.
Nothing was sacred. And, oh, God, I love that.
Well, you approach all your work with a tremendous, which I love. I do that too. Tremendous amount of energy. Mm-hmm. And so, what would be some of the direction that he would give you? Would it be tone it down, make it faster? That
he gave me very little direction. He just said, "Do your thing," and I guess he was satisfied with what I was doing.
Do you like a lot of direction? Do you like to?
No, frankly.
Yeah.
And now, when I stop and think about it, the one time I remember getting what I thought was overbearing direction.
Right.
I sort of said, "Oh, please, this is so boring already. Let's just get the turkey on the table and go." But I find that maybe it's an innate quality that we both have about bring it to the stage or the table or to the reading, and if it isn't right, somebody will tell you something. If it's on track, they'll leave you alone and let you do what you have to do.
Right. And well, when you saw the finished product, you must have been thrilled.
I'm never thrilled when I see myself.
Oh, really? You're not?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
The only time that I was thrilled that I can remember was in A Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
That remains one of my favorite shows.
Yes.
Because I got to play a real tart.
Yeah, which is currently, I checked, it's on, you can watch it on Amazon Prime.
She was such fun, such a little bitch. And they're so much more fun to play than the Goody Two-Shoes girls, you know?
Yes, that's true.
And I loved her, and I liked the way I looked, and I liked the way it came off, and I liked everything about it. I thought it was wonderful.
Was there, I love Tyrone Power. He always seems very mysterious to me, and he died so young. Was he... Because that's a complex role that he has in the movie. Was he somebody that sort of stayed to himself? He doesn't come off as a gregarious type person.
Well, he was always about, having tea or coffee or something with people when they weren't shooting. But if he wasn't going to be in the scene, he wasn't on the set. He wasn't mixing and mingling and having laughs. He was away. But he was very, very kind and very sweet with me. Couldn't have been nicer. I had told him somewhere down the long line that I regretted having grown up in Montreal, Canada. You had to be 16 to go to the movies. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that I saw was when in Verdun, the small town that we lived in, they let kids go for a while. I saw Passage to Marseille, I think, 10 times. I went to the movies with a sandwich and milk and came home at night, one of those things.
Yes.
And maybe Bambi I saw, but that was about it. So I never got to see his most prominent film then, which was Blood and Sand. Mm-hmm. And do you know that sweet man took a room at Rogers and Cowan, who were his publicists, and had a screening of it.
Wow.
For me.
Amazing.
Isn't that marvelous? So I never forgot that.
Was he as good looking in person as he seemed on screen? I mean, he seems to have, again, like a glow about him.
Yeah, he was. Absolutely gorgeous. Very, very heavy body odor.
Really?
Okay.
Now, isn't that a piece of information?
Yes.
But, there are some people that are built like that. That I think have to shower every 5 minutes, Isn't that an amazing thing that I just told you? I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's okay.
What the hell?
It's okay.
It's real.
Now I'm going to think of Nightmare Alley.
Even
yes. Crazier.
Oh my God, that was so wonderful.
I know. I think that's my favorite. Well, combined with, I do like The Razor's Edge quite a bit.
Wow.
Too.
I mean, so many things.
So wonderful. Okay, so let's get to. I've got to get to to Frank Sinatra and Sergeant 3. So first of all, just so I can imagine, what's it like to be at a party? When you talk about, you say it. Oh, Frank likes to have pasta. It's like, no, we don't know. I mean, it's just, I've seen photographs. And I'm dying to know, what's on the record player? Does he play his own music? Is he playing Sammy? Is he playing Tony Bennett? I mean, who's invited? Is Angie there? Who's there?
Well, let's see. I mean, all those people were there that you mentioned. I didn't do too many parties with him. I went to have dinner with him a lot by myself. Now you'd think, well, hell, something's going on there. I'm sorry, and I regret terribly that I never had an affair with Frank Sinatra. Just think of what I could have written about. I mean, we've been hearing.
See, that would have been a whole chapter.
Yeah.
But I went and I listened to him, and I found out that he never got over Ava Gardner. Mm-hmm. And he would talk about that. We were politically very much on the same page. He had become, from being a very big liberal, had become very much a conservative. And so he knew my story and what was going on with my family and what had happened, So he entertained a lot of the White House people, either in Palm Springs or at the house here, and I'd be invited. That was always very, very nice. I'd see him a lot in Palm Springs. I'd go to the compound and have dinner, and there was always somebody around, and sometimes there wasn't. Sometimes it was just the help,
Right.
or his dresser or hair guy would come in and sit down with us. But it was really, really lovely. And he was, I think, terribly, terribly hurt when he got his compound ready for
Right.
JFK's visit. And he, at the last minute, didn't come and was given Bing Crosby's house instead. And I think that just killed Frank, who had done so much to get him elected.
Yeah, I got him a song and everything.
Wow.
A little jingle.
Yeah. So I think that was probably one of the most hurtful things that ever happened to him, other than Ava.
Didn't they stay in touch though? Or
Ava?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
By phone and...
Oh yes. Oh yes, but he told a story that just broke my heart. He talked about he was down and out and not doing it all well. His career had been floundering. And this was while Ava was now over in Africa doing Mogambo. And Christmas was coming up. And so Frank went, and we talked about this because he knew I was from Montreal. And he had played a nightclub there, the name of which I don't remember now, many times. And the guy there loaned him like $10,000 or something. Gave him the money, said, here, go do it, buy a ticket, go to Europe. Things were cheaper then. and so he went out and bought stuff that he could take to Africa. Got there, then took a puddle jumper, over the mountains and over the snow into wherever they were shooting. And he brought a little itty-bitty Christmas tree that had been decorated, and he brought gifts for everybody. And he said that Ava sort of went, oh, hi, Frank. I have to go shoot now.
Oh.
And he didn't stay very long. He turned around and left, totally heartbroken.
Wow.
And I just think an icon like Frank Sinatra that has had affairs with every living human being except me, I think, was heartbroken.
Yeah.
And was still willing to talk about her to little old me that didn't know anything.
That's amazing. Well, he must have felt you were, compassionate.
Yeah, maybe.
When you were shooting the film, and you shot in Utah?
Kanab, Utah.
Wow.
Little Hollywood.
And the director was John Sturgis. Now, he was sort
Poor
of a
guy.
toughie, wasn't he?
Well, he tried to be a toughie. Let's put it this way. There was not one single scene that was shot without everybody laughing.
Uh-huh.
It was that kind of thing.
It looks
he tried
like it,
very
yeah.
hard. He tried. Well, it's such a silly movie, but it's okay.
That's the fun of it.
But he was lovely, and he just had to put up with everybody doing what they did, And gosh, he was a nice man. And Kanab, Utah was absolutely beautiful. And of course, unfortunately, I got treated like everybody's kid sister or daughter. And I would get sent home early. I mean, Frank would have a plane load of hookers come up from Vegas,
That sounds like a
showgirls
from Vegas.
From Vegas. He had planes coming and going all the time.
Oh, goodness.
And then after dinner, and seeing the rushes or whatever, I'd be sent home, and it was Sammy's job to walk me home, make sure I got home right. All in this big motel we were staying in,
Well, there's a lot of, when you watch the movie, there's a lot of two shots, and so we are working a lot with all of them. Peter Lawford. And so you're saying like they would basically only do one take and then crack up.
Well, that's what Frank insisted on.
Right.
He would say, I don't care if it takes you a week to set this shot.
Right.
But I don't want to hear after I've given you rehearsal, or we all have, that, oh, gee, the light went out over there, or there was a creak in the dolly track, or there's something that went wrong. I don't want to hear that, people.
Right.
I'm paying you good money. Do it right, and let's just do this once, maybe twice. And that's how most of it went, which was rather amazing.
So I'm sort of curious because, again, I had the very, very tail end of this in the 90s. So, when you're an actress in this movie, it's a huge starring part, but you're sent home to the hotel and you're hearing about like girls coming in planes. Like, was that just an accepted thing? I got, again, the tail end of it. Like, we're going to send you home now. And, there was a couple shoots that I was on out in Texas and things where, again, I'm like...
Well, usually the crew and everybody fools around and, has drinks and gets disorderly and you get bored with wherever you are and a cute young thing like you comes in, well, you're going to get
I had a few door poundings.
I'm sure you did. I did.
I never opened the door.
One time. My girlfriend, Barbara Stewart. Do you remember Miss Bunny on Gomer Pyle? Barbara Stewart.
Yes.
She was married to Dick Gautier. And I had just bought a car, a new Eldorado convertible. And through a dealer in St. Louis that was really a friend of a friend who gave me such a deal,
Yeah.
And so I said to Barbara, come on, we're going to go pick up my car. And we were driving back through Texas. And what do we run into at the motel that we're booked in but the company from HUD? So, of course, you've got Mr. Blue Eyes himself, Paul Newman.
Yes.
And darling, the young man.
Brendan DeWild.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're there. And, of course, we happen to check in. We're standing, signing in, and the leading lady,
Patricia
thank you,
Neal.
Patricia
Yes.
Neal was there.
Yep.
And hello, how are you? So on and so forth. There's going to be a cocktail party in this room, something or other later. Come on over. Well, we shouldn't have because we were new blood, and they'd already been through all of the cuties in Amarillo or wherever the hell we were. And so Barbara and I sort of said, we're going to leave now, and we escaped. Well, who comes knocking at the door? And it was one of those, thank God, motels that had the back door where you parked the car and the front door that faced the pool and all the goings on. And at the front door and window is Paul Newman, slightly drunk and disorderly, and Brandon DeWilde. And they're knocking and saying, come on, we're going to open the screen and come through. And, they had big windows. And we thought, oh, geez. So Barbara and I, in our nightgowns, got into our sandals and whatnot and went out the back door to the car and left. Found, a drive-in or something where we could have coffee in the car. And when we came back, they had settled down.
Wow.
No problem.
That is so funny.
In the morning, we're about to leave.
Yeah.
And both of them come to us and knock on the door. And we open the door, and they're both standing there with wildflowers that they've picked in their hands saying, we came to apologize for last night. I thought, this kind of apology from Paul Newman, I'll take any time.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, didn't you leave? You left once, too, also to go to Vegas to watch Frank perform. And he brought, one of his guests was Marilyn Monroe at the during shooting.
We were doing. The deal was that the guys, each one of the guys, was playing the Sands
together as the
not together.
Oh, separately.
One at a time.
Okay.
And so we would go for Frank's opening, and then we'd go for Frank's closing.
Right.
Then we'd go for Dean's opening and Dean's closing, all the way through. But during the entire run of all of this, Frank threw a hell of a birthday party for Dean Martin. And that was the night when all five of them got up on the stage and worked. And I have to tell you, there I sat. I didn't know that I was going to a fancy do thing, so I had a little cotton dress, sort of like what you have on, a darling dress. But that was for, Kanab, Utah, where the only thing you could do was watch them give haircuts, on Saturday night. So I'm in my cute little cotton dress, and across the way from me is Elizabeth Taylor in her furs and her big emeralds and things. She's married to Eddie Fisher. Mm-hmm. Next to me is John Wayne, Milton Berle. I mean, this plethora of stars, right? And I'm I'm in tall cotton. Now, Elizabeth, let's face it, was at the height of her beauty then. She was just so gorgeous. But Frank walked in to the showroom with Marilyn Monroe on his arm, and there was not a spotlight on her. She didn't need one. The woman glowed. Of course, she was in spangly, white, tight-fitting thing with a big fox wrap and her blonde hair and her glowing skin and beautiful eyes. And she put beautiful Elizabeth Taylor in another class altogether. When she came in, you know who else had that? The Gabors. Mm-hmm. All the Gabor sisters walked into a room and it was brighter.
Wow.
And that was Marilyn, and I thought, wow.
Amazing. Now, when she sits down, so was she with Sinatra at the time?
Yeah. Well, she was his date at the time. I don't know that they were a big romance. I think they were a quick roll in the hay a couple of times, you know.
Yes.
But I know that he was very perturbed by her death and was very much involved with everything that was going on. And it was all a fiasco.
And again, speaking of, mysteries and tragedies.
Oh, yeah.
I once met Marlon Brando, and he said he blatantly said, they killed her. So I don't know. It's a little mysterious.
I tend to agree, and let me tell you why. This is kind of interesting.
You knew her.
Oh, yeah. I went out to dinner the night that she died with Sam Yorty, who was then mayor, had been for quite some time, of Los Angeles, and his wife, and a group of us. I can't quite remember who or what or where. But he, at that time, carried one of those very large phones that had to lie on the table. And whenever anybody of import came into the city, the police department would notify the mayor who's here, who's at this airport, who came in, who's where, whatever. And he got a call saying that Robert Kennedy had come in. It was at LAX. Fine, so he knows about it. Then, a few hours later, Robert Kennedy and party left back for San Francisco. That was the night she was dead. Now, I don't know who commandeered what.
Right.
But Freddie Otash, do you remember that name?
I do not.
He was with the police department for years, and then he became a private investigator and was the investigator to the stars. Mm-hmm. He worked for everybody. He worked for Frank. He worked for everybody. And he became a very good friend of mine. He lived between Los Angeles and Cannes, kept an apartment in Cannes, and we'd visit a lot whenever I was in Europe. And he said that what they didn't go for, or if they did, they didn't announce to the world, and that was that they felt that she had received a shot anally that nobody ever thought about.
Yeah, something strange there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, well, we'll never really, and plus her diary and all of her things disappeared. There's a lot of swirling mystery.
So much.
Around her. Obviously she was troubled, but
clearly,
but still.
Yeah. But oh God, she was such a pretty thing. And oh my God, when you read what and hear from Billy Wilder about how tough it was
to
working with her, but it was worth it. My God.
What's interesting is when you look on IMDb, she's still. Do you know that she's the #1 recognizable actress? Still. Number one. Of all time.
Wow.
She's the #1 recognizable actress.
And how many years is it since she's dead?
Many
60?
60s, since the early
57 years.
Wow.
57 years?
Yeah.
Thank you, man. That's a lot. I want to talk about so many of doing 2,000 over all these 2,000 episodes of television, and you mentioned the Twilight Zone. Also doing Perry Mason, we used to have, people used to say, they still sort of say at the 20-minute, your Perry Perry Mason moment, where he comes in. Were those fun to shoot?
Sure, yeah, it was fun. And it was really fun and quite amazing is that the producer of the show, me and names. This is when I know I'm getting senile.
No, you're doing great.
Because I love her so well, and I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay.
She was a major star in the 30s and into the 40s, and she produced the show. And I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, she was a beautiful woman, and she taught me something that I think is so important.
Is this Gail Patrick?
Thank you, Gail Patrick Jackson. Thank you.
You got it.
Beautiful woman. Was not afraid to have young, maybe cuter, certainly younger actresses around her and her husband and the people that she liked. Mm-hmm. She would invite me as a guest to come to a dinner party that she was having. And you'd think, ooh, producer lady, that you have to be careful because they might not like you. And that taught me something so important, and that is never be afraid of young talent around you. Help them along the way. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to get in your way, you're only going to impede their way.
Right.
So don't do that. And I always loved that about her, and I felt like it was almost like going to drama school doing Perry Mason because I got to play so many different characters. I think I did 6 or 8 of them.
Wow.
And each one was a different person.
Right.
And a different character that I got to play. And I just loved her for hiring me so often. And of course, Barbara Hale became a good friend.
Uh-huh.
And I spoke at her funeral not too long ago, a year ago, I guess.
And what studio did they shoot Perry Mason? Do you remember?
It was off of Western.
Okay.
In Hollywood.
Okay.
I can't remember what it was called.
All right.
But I remember that it was at that end of Hollywood, the east end of Hollywood.
I see. And do you remember how long they would take to shoot? They were all filmed?
That was filmed. Yeah, not 4 cameras. It was filmed. And I think they took about a week to shoot.
Yeah. I mean, very cinematic. They still sort of hold up. Did you have others and you did many, many Westerns?
Oh, my Lord, yes. And I miss the Westerns.
Yes. Have you seen the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Not yet.
Okay, well, there's an extended fun sequence which takes place on Lancer, which would have been a show in the 60s.
Yes.
But it's super, super fun.
I loved the Westerns, and I'm so grateful to the guys, the wranglers, that wrangled the horses and the sheep and the cows and the goats and the whatever.
Yeah.
They taught me how to ride. I mean, I said, yeah, I ride. Sure, I rode. I mean, I could barely get my foot in the stirrup. The horse was up here, and I'm 5'3". But they also taught me how to handle guns. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I am a gun person. I like 6-shooters and Colts and, all of that stuff.
Don't mess with Ruta.
Yeah, don't mess with me. No, that's for sure. But they taught me to respect a gun and to respect handling it and not be foolish with anything. You know who was fabulous with guns and twirling and quick draw was Sammy.
Oh, yes.
Sammy Davis loved it. And it really ticked me off because my gun belt fit him. And I'm not exactly huge,
Yeah. Well, he was
tiny.
Very, very tiny. I have to mention very briefly, because we're running out of time, the film.
No.
I know. Wait, you can come back anytime.
Okay.
The film that you did, which I think is a classic, not too many people know about it, but it's Funny Bones.
Oh, yes.
But that was sort of in speaking to Mr. Lewis about it, I don't think he doesn't have the fondest memories of it. I think he's wrong. I love the movie.
I did too.
Oliver Platt.
And yes, he played, Oliver Platt played my son, and Jerry Lewis's son.
Very funny movie.
And there was a very sweet scene that I like in that very much, where we go to see him perform, and he's bombing terribly. It's awful. But Jerry and I had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Because we just got together in his trailer or mine between shots all the time, and this was all shot in England.
Yes.
Except for some scenes that were shot in Las Vegas, which we had to do. And I can't remember the principals' names now, but there was the big switchover going on at Disney at the time. And they didn't put any money into promoting this that became like a cult iconic film.
Yeah.
Funny Bones, which is, it really is very
I love
funny.
this movie. I mention it all the time.
Oh, good. Oh, I love that. Oh, what a great shot.
It's so weird and very funny, dark, beautifully shot. I'm a big fan of the film Funny Bones.
I was thrilled to be in it, and it was such fun to be. Not that I have ever worked. Well, I have worked with Jerry and on his television stuff, but
yes,
but I had not done a movie ever with him. Never forgive him for that. But this was fun to be together, and just being there was just fabulous fun.
I want you to tell the story, of course, which is so great, about your grandmother, getting your grandmother?
It's a very long story.
All right. Well,
I think we're going to run out of time.
We're going to run out of time. Well, it'll be in your book.
It will be in my book, but I think that the story of getting my grandmother out of Siberia, where she was deported, along with my grandfather, whose legs were frozen on the cattle car that they were being deported on, to Siberia, 6 weeks in a cattle car. Can you imagine?
No.
And his legs were frozen, and when they took off his boots, the flesh came up with it. He died from gangrene. And somebody, when I went to the Soviet Union, I said, somebody explain to me why these little farm people that didn't have a pot in which to pee were sent to Siberia. And the only thing I can figure out is that the Soviet authorities were trying to repatriate with Russians those people that were born, raised, married there, and had families there. And so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Czechoslovakia all got Russians coming in.
Right.
Excuse me. And they got sent to Siberia. Why? Why? They weren't elitist. They weren't educators. They weren't authors. They weren't anything. They were little farm folk, you know.
Very strange.
And anyway, I think it deserves a book on its own, and it really deserves to be a movie.
Well, hopefully that'll be in your book. Okay, last couple, you've done a lot of musicals.
Oh,
also.
yes.
Do you have your own? Because we performed together when we did our little variety show on the cruise. But do you have your own show that you travel around and do? Or
I could.
tell
I
stories
did. Yeah, I've played a couple of places, private clubs, and
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of very expensive money to put into something that you're never sure you're going to get any of it back.
Right.
To put an act together is exceedingly expensive. To get the music written and put together, to get your arrangements done, to get your jokes and patter going is very difficult. But I have played a couple of times, and I do. But I do a lot of funerals.
You're big at funerals?
Yes. My darling friend Gary Damsker died, and I'm going to his funeral this week. And so I'll sing at his funeral.
How do you react to that? Is that just is it just a part of show business? You
Listen,
have to go on, or?
It's not show business, it's a part of life. Dying is a part of life.
Right.
It's the end of it, and so just accept that it comes to all of us.
Yes.
And I don't get all crazy emotional about stuff like that. I mean, I have my sad moments because I miss my friend.
Right.
But I don't go into spasms and screaming and tears. Not worth it.
I'm curious too, just because I wasn't there. When you talk about the most talented people in show business, people always reference Ethel Merman, Zero Mostel, Sammy Davis Jr. Do you have who do you think was the greatest performer of all time?
By performer, that's an all-encompassing word.
I know, it's
and
almost
it takes
impossible,
in a lot of things, but in some ways, I absolutely adored because she could do almost anything, Lucille Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that a pretty woman was a comedian. On the other hand, one of the ugliest women in the world and my best friend, but she became beautiful because she said, I'm going to die beautiful, was Phyllis Diller.
Oh.
And I appreciated what she did.
Yes.
You know, she could just get out there and go dunk, 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 rapid fire, and you never stopped laughing. You were ready to pee your pants. It was so wonderful. You know?
She was ahead of her time. Nobody really has replaced Phyllis Diller.
No.
Just that kind of persona.
No. Well, nobody's ever going to replace Frank either, you know.
Well, no one's ever going to replace Ruta Lee.
Oh, well, I hope not for a while anyway.
Well, Ruta, please come back when your book is out.
I will, promise. You heard it all. She said come back.
You have to come back. I adore you. You're just you can't help but smile when you're,
Thank you.
You light up a room.
Thank you. That's a very kind thing to say.
You really do.
And I just want to thank you and all your viewers and listeners for the opportunity of visiting with you wherever you are, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, in your bathroom, if you're rich. You've got a TV in there. I'm so pleased to be a part of your life, and I'm so glad to have you in mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruta. Thank you.
Gosh, what a pleasure. I have to echo what Illeana said. It's funny, I'm just sitting here as a producer, but also just as such a fan of this show and just having you here. So thank you so much.
And that comes from a very handsome young dude.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say.
Who can't possibly know what the hell he's talking about.
Well, guys, we had Ruta Lee in today, of course. We will bring you back when your book is coming out. But make sure you stay tuned for that. And also for fans of the podcast who are in LA, this Sunday we'll be at the Alex Theater in Glendale doing a live podcast with Bela Lugosi Jr. and Boris Karloff's daughter, Sarah Karloff.
So, how wonderful.
And watching The Vampire Bat and The Old Dark House.
Yes.
Wow, what perfect timing.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, so definitely make your way out. You'll get to meet Illeana. We'll be selling books there as well. Yes. And we're just really excited. A lot of amazing guests coming down the pike for the rest of the year, so we're really looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks everyone for listening. As I always say, everyone's life is a movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Today was pretty much a musical comedy. So thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, everyone. So long.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.